Somewhere in your life, a quiet meeting occurred, and nothing was the same after that. It didn't announce itself with fireworks or grand declarations. It arrived softly, a glance that lingered too long, a silence that felt like it said everything, or a dream that clung to your skin like morning fog. You weren't looking, but something in you knew. A familiar ache curled in your chest, the sense that you had known them before, not with your mind, but with your soul. And yet, the world kept turning. You went separate ways, or perhaps you stayed close, yet never truly touched the core of what was felt. Life made its demands. Time moved forward, but the impression stayed, carved into the invisible places of your being. This isn't a story of whether they loved you back. This is about whether your soul woke up when they appeared. In this video, we're not chasing fantasy. We're listening to the soul's memory and Carl Jung's wisdom on what it truly means to encounter someone who changes your inner world forever. And by the end, you may realize you didn't miss them. You met them, and that was the beginning. Carl Jung did not believe in coincidences. He believed the psyche has its own intelligence, one that speaks in symbols, dreams, and strange meetings. In this view, there are certain encounters in life that feel fated, not because of magic, but because of what they awaken in us. He once wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." And that is the essence of the soulmate. Not someone who fills your empty places, but someone who ignites your transformation. They don't arrive to solve your life. They arrive to mirror it, to reflect the parts of you that are longing to be remembered. Your light, your longing, your unlived potential, your deepest wound. Sometimes they enter with tenderness, other times like lightning, but always with purpose. From a Jungian lens, this kind of connection is not a romantic plotline. It is an archetypal initiation, a spiritual threshold where your inner world begins to shift. Suddenly, old desires fall away. Old versions of you begin to dissolve, and something real, something timeless, begins to emerge. You don't always stay with this person, but you're never quite the same after them. So as we move forward, let's explore the 4 signs that you may have already met this person. Not in fantasy, not in projection, but in the silent language of the soul, where recognition is the only proof you need. Sign number 1. You didn't just meet them. You remembered them. It didn't feel new. When your eyes met, when their voice reached your ears for the first time, it was as if the universe sighed in recognition, like 2 puzzle pieces that had once belonged to the same picture, long separated by time, now finding their place again. Not through logic, not through explanation, but through the deep inner yes that rose in your body before your mind could catch up. There was no need for introductions. You already knew the rhythm of their presence. Like an old melody from childhood you couldn't name, but still knew by heart. Carl Jung had a word for this sensation: anamnesis, the soul's remembering. The feeling that we are not encountering something for the first time, but being reunited with something we once lost. And this is not fantasy. It is psychological truth, wrapped in symbolic clothing. In Jungian psychology, we each carry within us powerful archetypes, primordial patterns that live in the collective unconscious. The soulmate often arrives as a living embodiment of one of these inner figures: the anima, the inner feminine within a man, or the animus, the inner masculine within a woman. When they appear, they don't just charm us, they activate us. They stir emotions and memories that have no clear origin. They pull forth longing, but also fear, love, but also grief. And this is where the shadow enters, because what feels like home may also be the gateway to our deepest wounding. The more someone feels familiar, the more likely we are to project onto them everything we have buried: our childhood abandonment, our unmet desires, our lost innocence, and yes, even echoes from what Jung called the transpersonal unconscious, those patterns that stretch beyond this life, into realms we cannot name but instinctively feel. So when you feel overwhelmed, obsessive, or irrationally drawn to someone, it may not be because you're broken. It may be because your psyche recognizes a symbol, an archetypal figure from your internal myth, and is responding with the intensity of memory, not just emotion. This doesn't mean they're your destiny. It means they are a mirror, reflecting something ancient, buried, and sacred within you. The medicine is not to idolize them, nor to dismiss the experience as foolish. It is to ask the soul's question: what part of me is waking up in their presence? Because some people arrive not to walk beside us, but to lead us back to forgotten parts of ourselves. They are not always meant to stay, but their presence is never wasted. They come to awaken the sacred remembering, not of who they are, but of who you were before the forgetting. Sign number 2. They reflected your inner light and your deepest wound. They looked at you, really looked at you, and for a moment, you forgot how to hide. It wasn't what they said, it was how they saw you, as if the mask you'd worn your whole life had never existed at all, as if every part of you, the radiant, the raw, the wrecked, was suddenly illuminated. You didn't know whether to run or to weep, because when someone sees your light before you do, when they speak to your potential instead of your performance, your soul stirs. But so does your shadow. Carl Jung often spoke of what he called the gold in the shadow, the parts of ourselves we've hidden away, not only the wounds, but also the brilliance we were too afraid to claim. A true soulmate doesn't just validate the parts of you that feel lovable. They hold up a mirror so precise, so piercing, that you see your own buried greatness and the fear that's kept it buried. In the same glance, they reflect your radiance and your ache, your potential, and your pain. This is why the connection feels both holy and unbearable. To be seen without armor is to be vulnerable in the deepest sense, not because they harm you, but because they see the version of you you're still learning to believe in. And that level of exposure is terrifying, not because it's wrong, but because it's real. You may find yourself resisting their love, sabotaging closeness, doubting their admiration, because somewhere within you still lives the belief, I am not worthy of being fully seen and still loved. But that's where their gift lies. They didn't come to comfort your illusions. They came to confront your self-abandonment, to call out the sacred truth that no one else dared to name. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply never seen completely, until now. And that confrontation is not cruelty, it's medicine. Because healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when we are witnessed and still held, when someone looks at us and doesn't flinch, when someone mirrors our soul back to us and we finally see it clearly. They didn't come to fix you. They came to reflect the version of you that was always whole, just hidden beneath survival. If someone ever made you feel both painfully exposed and unimaginably loved, if they unearthed your shadow and your light in the same breath, that wasn't confusion. That was soul alchemy. You didn't hallucinate the connection. You survived it. And now, the only question left is, will you become who they saw, even if they're no longer there to see it? Sign number 3. The timing wasn't perfect, but the impact was eternal. Maybe they came too soon, before you knew how to receive them, or too late, after your life had already tangled itself into promises you couldn't unmake. Maybe the timing never made sense on paper. There were careers, commitments, cities in between. They were already with someone, or maybe you were. And yet, despite it all, they left a mark. Not on your timeline, but on your being. Carl Jung would call this a numinous encounter, an experience so spiritually charged that it escapes logic, but lingers in the soul as undeniable truth. It may not have lasted, but it meant something. Your rational mind, trained to seek resolution, may call it a missed opportunity, but your soul whispers it mattered. Because not all soulmates arrive to stay. Some arrive to awaken, to interrupt your story in the most necessary way, to set fire to your carefully constructed plans, and show you who you really are beneath them. They may have never held your hand in public, but they held your essence for a moment, and in that sacred instant, you glimpsed the version of yourself you didn't know you were still searching for. And when they left, whether through circumstance, silence, or mutual surrender, they didn't take that version of you with them. They left it behind, inside you. But with that awakening comes grief, not just for the person, but for the life you imagined in those brief moments of soul clarity. You may find yourself mourning a future that never had the chance to unfold, a parallel reality where things aligned, where hearts met in the right season, and love could have grown without obstacles. But grief is not a punishment. Grief is a sacred teacher. It tells us where our soul has been touched by something real. It reminds us that love, even when unfulfilled in form, can still be complete in its function. They didn't just pass through, they redirected you, like a falling star that lights up the entire sky for one breathless second. They change the way you see the night forever. No, it didn't work out the way you hoped. But what if it worked out the way your soul needed? Because you didn't lose them. You gained something, a fire that now guides you when everything else goes dark, a deeper knowing of what's real, a higher standard for love, a clearer path forward. Remember, a soulmate doesn't always stay, but they always leave you more yourself than you were before. And perhaps that was their role all along. Sign number 4. After them, you couldn't go back to sleep. Life felt irreversibly different after they came, not because of what they gave you, but because of what they woke up in you. They didn't hand you a new life. They handed you a mirror. And suddenly, everything you'd quietly tolerated, the half-lived dreams, the emotionally numb connections, the way you'd been moving through life on autopilot, became impossible to ignore. It wasn't about them. It was about you, seeing yourself clearly, for the first time in a long time. Carl Jung believed that certain people act as initiators of the individuation process, the soul's journey toward wholeness. They arrive not to complete you, but to awaken the parts of you that have been asleep, buried, number forgotten. When this kind of person touches your life, they don't just awaken your heart, they rupture your illusions, your beliefs about love, about safety, about who you are allowed to be in this world. And that rupture is sacred, because on the other side of it, you start asking dangerous, holy questions. Is this the life I want? Is this the love I deserve? Is this the truth of my soul? You begin to want more, not from them, but from yourself. This is the clearest sign of a soulmate. They don't leave you with answers. They leave you hungry for your own truth. But that hunger is not without cost. When someone pulls you back to your authentic essence, you cannot go back to sleep. You can't go back to pretending that half love is enough. That silence is safety. That shrinking is survival. You start shedding old skins, identities you outgrew but never dared to remove, stories that kept you small, people who once felt safe but now feel like cages. And in that shedding, something terrifying arises, the fear of aloneness. Because once you've experienced a connection that lives in the bones, a soul-deep resonance that feels older than time, everything else starts to feel flat. Ordinary love doesn't satisfy anymore, not because you're entitled, but because you now know what truth feels like in someone's presence. And yet, you are not meant to chase that feeling again. You are meant to become it, because this person didn't arrive to be your home. They arrived to show you where your home has always been, within your own soul. They didn't just change your heart, they awakened your destiny, the path you didn't know you were waiting to walk, the voice within you that you'd long silenced, the version of you that was born in the fire they unknowingly lit. You can never unknow what they revealed, and that is the most sacred gift of all. And once the fire has been lit, once the veil has been lifted, you cannot return to the life you had before. Because they didn't just touch your story, they touched your soul's trajectory. And now, the only thing left to do is answer the call they awakened. So now, take a breath. Place your hand on your heart. Let the silence speak what words never could. And gently whisper to yourself, I honor the ones who awakened me, even if they couldn't stay. Because this is not about holding on. It's about holding sacred what was stirred. Tonight, light a candle. Not for them, but for you. The version of you that emerged from that encounter. The one who sees more clearly now, who feels more deeply, who lives more consciously. If you wish, journal this. Who have I met that stirred something eternal in me? What part of myself did they awaken? What grief, gift, or guidance did they leave behind? You don't have to chase that connection. You only have to become the person it called you to be. That is the path forward. That is how the soul remembers itself. Some soulmates stay. Others pass through like comets across a quiet night sky. Brief, brilliant, and unforgettable. But the miracle was never in the duration. It was in the awakening. If someone broke you open, if they shattered your illusions and showed you the raw, radiant truth of who you are, don't mourn the ending. Honor the beginning. Because their purpose was not to walk your path with you. It was to point you toward it. You haven't lost love. You've gained the capacity to become it, to radiate the truth they first helped you touch. And that is the most sacred sign of all. This is Echoes of Psyche, where we don't chase love stories. We listen to the souls, where every wound is an invitation, every ending a threshold, and every encounter a mirror. Until next time, walk gently, dream deeply, and remember who you are.